Towering over the common folk, the mighty giant reached down, plucked a boulder from the ground, lifting it with ease, and launched it across the hills at his foes. Powerful, rage-filled, and awe-inspiring, the giant was a sight to behold and be feared. Giants are iconic in mythology and folklore around the world. In Europe particularly, they are dangerous and hard-headed monsters, the terror of innocent folk and the enemies of brave heroes. People are fascinated by giants. There's something in our psyche that reacts to superhuman size and strength. But where does that come from? In over a dozen examples of giants around the world, we will discover what they mean to us and how they have become such a huge part of our traditions even to this day. Some of the most famous giants are the Jötnar from Norse mythology. They are the enemies of the Asgard gods, living in a cold and dangerous land. Many Norse myths feature them, like when Thor and Loki go to Utgard and meet Utgard, Loki, and Heimir. In fact, Loki had 3 children with a giantess called Angerboda. They were Hel, Jormungandr, and Fenrir. They're often villains, but not always. And they're one of the original races, even predating the Asgard gods. In other traditions, giants are a race that existed before humans too. In Bulgarian mythology, the Ispolini were a race of giants created by God and stood up to 3 meters tall. They came after the dwarves, who were too weak and died out. So God created their opposite in the Ispolini, some with multiple heads or a single eye, and they could shout so loud they could communicate across mountain ranges. In the end, God destroyed them, thinking they were not suited to live on Earth, and then created humans. The race of giants known as the Kinametsin from Aztec mythology also fell foul of the gods. They refused to worship and committed sins, so the gods decided to wipe them out. In the first age of the Hindu cycle, Satya Yuga, humans grew to giant size. And in Jainism, a small Indian religion, people in previous eras were much taller, getting progressively smaller with each stage of the cycle. The humans in the previous stage to ours stood at 1,500 meters tall and lived for 705.6 quintillion years on average. Those in the first stage lived with utmost happiness at 6 miles tall, with a lifespan of well over a centillion years. Regardless of their exact size and age, there's a theme of giants as a race that lived before. This could be based on discoveries of the bones of prehistoric megafauna. When many of these mythologies began, people knew nothing of archaeology or paleontology. They didn't know mammoths and mastodons existed. So when they found the remains of one, perhaps a fossilized mammoth femur or a giant molar, they might have attributed it to a humanoid of grand proportions. In fact, this is exactly the case of Teutobochus, the giant king of the Teutons. A 30-foot-long skeleton was discovered in the 17th century in a tomb engraved with Teutobochus Rex. Apparently, this Teutobochus was of epic proportions. Later study proved the bones to actually be from a Dinotherium, similar to a mammoth. Giants were also thought to be the creators of great natural features. The most famous of these is probably the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, a massive field of basalt columns. The story goes that the heroic Irish giant Finn MacCool was called out by Benandonna, a giant from Scotland. Finn built the causeway to cross the sea between Ireland and Scotland so they could have their fight in Ireland. This makes even more sense when you see Fingal's Cave in Scotland, where there are also basalt columns, so it seems logical that somebody built a causeway. In Basque folklore, the Gentil and Mairu giants are credited with creating hills, throwing huge rocks around, and making dolmens, stone circles, and other man-made megalithic structures. Without geological or historical understanding, sometimes the best explanation of strange phenomena like this is that giants did it. Take Stonehenge, for example. If you saw this huge monument and had no idea of its history, it seems much more likely to be made by giants long ago than by regular humans. Much in the same way, some people today still can't believe the Egyptian pyramids were built by humans. They attribute their construction to aliens or some other supernatural force. And nowadays we have much more knowledge than the people telling stories thousands of years ago. However, the idea of giants as a prehistoric race that lived long before humans, or as natural sculptors, doesn't paint the whole picture. Many myths have giants living alongside humans, often causing them great danger. The Jötnar of Norse mythology we mentioned earlier are an example of this. They are enemies to the Asgard gods and will fight at Ragnarok. The Nephilim of Abrahamic tradition are giants of great strength. To quote Numbers chapter 13 verse 32 to 33, "And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come of the Nephilim, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." These were huge people feared by the Israelite spies who warned of the Nephilim presence in the city of Canaan. An example from North America is the Site Ka of northern Paiute myth. These were red-haired cannibals often described as giants. They were the source of terror and conflict until the northern Paiute people finally defeated them at Lovelock Cave in Nevada. The Gigantes of Greek mythology were a tribe of great beings born from the blood of Uranus's severed genitals splattering across Gaia, the Earth. They grew up to fight against Zeus in the Gigantomachy. What's notable about them is their name, the root of the word giant. And although we might think of giant as meaning big in size, it actually stems from the idea of being born from Gaia, the Earth. They are earthborn. The Gigantes weren't really giants in the sense that we understand, but they were ferocious and very strong. Some giant myths may have come from exaggerations of enemy groups. A band of burly barbarians attacking from the mountains is a frightening prospect. Stories passed down of invaders would depict them as larger than life, stronger and wilder. And if your group beats them, then it's even more to boast about if they're mighty, colossal opponents. Which is true for individual giants too. Take the Abrahamic story of David and Goliath, with Goliath supposed to be around 3 meters tall. You can imagine the Israelites exaggerating the size of Goliath so that David's victory is all the more impressive. Giants as individual dangerous foes is a common theme in many stories. Gog-Magog was a giant from Welsh mythology, according to Geoffrey of Monmouth. He was one of the last remaining giants in Britain and was killed by the hero Coroneus, who threw him off a cliff. Then there was Humbaba in the Epic of Gilgamesh, a giant or ogre who was slain by Gilgamesh himself, an event which made the gods furious. And of course the classic fairy tale Jack and the Beanstalk sees a young lad go up against a fierce and aggressive giant. Not to be confused with Jack the Giant Killer from Cornish myth, who went around slaying lots of evil giants. They're a classic villain, human enough to suffer from human vices, but powerful and dangerous enough to offer a real threat. But not all giants were bad. In some cases they were great allies, and in others they were the heroes themselves. The founder of Armenia, Haik, was a giant according to legend. Over 2,000 years before the Common Era, Haik defeated the tyrant Babylonian king Bel by killing him with an impossibly distant longbow shot, and in doing so freeing his people. Kalev is a giant hero from Estonian and Finnish myth who did many great deeds in the Kalevi Poeg poem. He goes on various adventures, trying to rescue his kidnapped mother, getting a cursed sword from a blacksmith, becoming king, journeying to the ends of the earth, and defeating Satan. Bran the Blessed was the giant king of Britain according to Welsh myth. He protected the country until his death, and his head was kept in London to assure that Britain would be safe from invaders until King Arthur dug it up and proclaimed himself the protector. And of course there's the Big Friendly Giant, or BFG, in Roald Dahl's book. A rare example of giants being kind and helpful rather than huge and brutish. We've looked at several reasons why giants might be so prevalent in mythology and folklore. Some are humans trying to rationalize grand natural phenomena or ancient structures, while others are an exaggeration of already impressive or dangerous humans. There is another point of view explaining our obsession with giants. I find myself supporting it, although it is laughably simplistic. It's simply that they're big. Excessively big things interest us. They awe us. They're out of the ordinary, in conflict with the mental pictures in our mind. We notice extremes much more than averages. This is not just true in mythology, but in the real world. Who can look at an image of Robert Wadlow and not be stunned into disbelief by his near 9 feet of height? Andre the Giant was a special attraction professional wrestler of prodigious size at 7 feet tall and over 500 pounds. Fans flocked to see him wrestle at Madison Square Garden simply because he was an enormous man. Not to mention all of the legendary stories about how much beer he drank and farting in Japanese elevators. He was a living legend right up to his death in 1993. Andre had gigantism, which isn't a common thing, but it's regular enough for some of the giants in the old myths to have some basis in reality. They would have likely been powerful fighters and feared by many purely because of their size. They would have been the source of rumors spread from village to village across the whole country of a huge person of great might and danger. Someone like Goliath may have actually existed, having the same condition of gigantism as Andre the Giant. Whatever the reasons, giants are the subject of countless stories, both as hard-headed villains and heroic warriors, and we should appreciate them for bringing such joy and entertainment to our lives. And if the same is true of this video, please give the like button a gigantic hit. And if you're interested in the biggest and most terrifying sea serpents from mythology, you can watch the video on screen now. In the future, I'll be making videos on many of the stories and characters from this one, which will all be in the description when ready. See you next time.